All right, products to stay away from. Now, if you care about your account and keeping it active and still being able to grow this business and make any money, you absolutely want to pay very close attention to what I'm going to be talking about in this video. I'm going to be going over products that you need to stay away from, products that are like, don't even consider it, and then some products that are going to be more geared towards what's your risk tolerance on the platform. There's a lot of new issues coming up with generic listings, which we're going to be talking about throughout this lesson, but there's also issues with a lot of other listings. Don't make the mistake of thinking, okay, just because I sell on Amazon and just because I was able to get ungated, I have nothing to worry about and no risk at all. I have always been very cautious with certain things that I will do and I will avoid. One of those things is, selling something that has an IP complaint on it, because I want to protect my account at all costs and I don't want to put myself in unnecessary risk when I don't have to do that, to avoid the headache. You know what I mean? Now, these are products that you need to stay away from. You need to avoid at all costs products that are private label. Private label, like other private label sellers that are sourcing from China, they have their own brand on Amazon and they're coming in and they're selling it on the platform. The private label model. You want to avoid sourcing those products. Sometimes these brands will sell their products to different wholesalers, or wholesalers just happen to get some of their products through liquidation, or whatever way they end up getting it. And some of these wholesale suppliers will try to sell you these private label products. And if you go and list them on there, you're going to get kicked off that listing and you're going to have a lot of issues with your account. Avoid this at all costs. Number 2, which is a current issue that just started happening the last couple of months, is any generic products. I used to put this more geared towards your risk tolerance, but I've recently moved this to avoid it at all costs. And we're going to get into that here shortly. Now, there's also a set of products that will just depend on your risk tolerance. One of those being brands on the listing. If a brand is on the listing, which I'm going to show you what that looks like, for me, I don't list on there. I used to do that in the beginning and I kept getting so many issues when I was listing alongside the brand, and I would get a cease and desist letter. I would get an IP complaint. I would get this, I would get that. And it's because you have to think about it like this. If a brand is selling on the platform and they're selling on every single one of their listings, unless you can really bring in like a ton of value that they're not bringing to the table themselves, they're going to want to eliminate all of the sellers to control the listing and get all of the sales on Amazon. So the risk becomes, when are they going to figure out how to do that? Because there's different levels of sophistication on Amazon when it comes to brands selling on there. Some know a lot, some are experts, some know nothing, right? So that's why they haven't figured out how to kick everybody off. And there are those situations where some brands may not care that there's other people selling it on the platform. Most of the time, it's not the case. So the risk becomes, when are they going to figure out how to do this? They may figure it out next year, how to kick everybody off, or they may figure it out tomorrow. Right? But at some point, they're going to figure out how to get control of their listing, how to file IP complaints, how to get sellers off, how to send cease and desist letters. They're going to eventually figure that out, and then you're going to get caught in the crosshairs, and you're going to have to deal with a lot of headache. So for me personally, my risk tolerance, I avoid this because in the beginning I didn't, and I ran into a lot of issues. Second, products with clear signs of IP issues. Keep it drops. Remember in the section, if you haven't watched that section where I tell you how to avoid IP complaints completely or severely reduce your risk of getting an IP complaint, we talk about keep it drops, which is a sharp drop in sellers. So this is where you'll see a listing go from, let's say, 30 sellers one moment, and the next moment, there's only one seller, okay? These are known as keep it drops, which you'll learn in that lesson. But if there is an active sign of an IP issue, technically, you're good. Like technically, as long as you're sourcing from legitimate sources, you can beat a lot of these IP complaints. It's just whether or not you want to run the risk of getting an IP complaint that you cannot beat, right? Or a brand just constantly keeps coming after you, or Amazon doesn't accept your plan of action or your response to that IP and doesn't take it off. But if we're sourcing from legitimate sources, we're supposed to be okay. Now, the reason I put it on depends on your risk tolerance is because some people don't care. Some people are like, oh, I don't care how many IP complaints I get. I'll just kind of deal with them as they come. And sometimes you're going to run into products that had an IP complaint, let's say 2 years ago or 3 years ago or even 4 years ago, and they haven't had any more issues with IP since then, those are a little bit less of a risk. But again, it comes down to your risk tolerance and what you want to do. For me, unless the IP issue has come from like years ago, I won't even consider it because I don't want to deal with the headache personally. But let's talk about listing generic products. Now, generic products are very tempting because a lot of times they sell well or they're super profitable, but they're super, super risky. And I'm going to show you exactly what they look like so that you know how to avoid them. Proper documentation of invoices is absolutely crucial if you're going to decide to jump on a generic listing. But personally, based off of everything that I've seen with the Section 3 deactivations that have been going on for the last 6 to 8 months, Amazon is really cracking down really hard on Amazon sellers, mainly due because of generic listings and them perceiving it as a counterfeit issue. I'm going to explain why they see it as a counterfeit issue when I show you what a generic listing looks like. But generic listings may display generic as the brand, a variation of the brand name that is not correct, or a completely different brand name. Okay, so let's go over what that looks like. All right, so this is what a generic product looks like. This is the easiest one to identify. You're going to get an IP alert from the software IP Alert, which if you guys don't have, I highly recommend you get them. Look at the software stack. I give you a discount code on there, but it's going to give you an alert like this. This brand on this listing is generic. Amazon has very strict guidelines about generic listings. Please ensure that this listing follows Amazon's terms before trying to list it on an ASIN. For me, this is a huge flashing red flag, and I completely avoid this product altogether. But sometimes they're more subtle. Let's avoid the IP alert little cherry light right there and pretend it's not there. This is a standard listing for this brand. This is not a generic listing right here. You have Ryobi, which is a power tool company, and under the brand section right here, it says Ryobi, right? That is correct. And there is no issues here whatsoever. That is exactly how it should be. Well, sometimes you're going to run into something that looks more like this. It's going to give you a IP alert and the brand is generic, even though it is Ryobi. So the reason you start running into issues is because it's like Amazon's like, well, this is a Ryobi brand, but the brand that is registered under our catalog that somebody went on and created to get more sales for themselves, because that's essentially what these generic listings are. These generic listings, another seller went on and created this listing to be able to get all of the sales for themselves at a higher price or be able to capitalize before more competition showed up. And that's why they ended up just not listing it on the actual legitimate listing for this product. They ended up going and creating their own, right? So it'll say brand generic and we get this IP alert, right? Sometimes it'll look like this. It's another Ryobi brand, but under the brand, it says CDMGLC, okay? Sometimes you'll see something, maybe it'll say, if the brand on Amazon for every single listing is Ryobi, and then you see on the brand it says Ryobi Premium or Ryobi Plus or Ryobi US or Ryobi HP, whatever it is, that is also a generic listing. They are just making a variation of the brand. Sometimes it's really easy to spot when they're just dumb and they just do stuff like this, but sometimes it's a little bit harder to spot. Right? There was this Celtic salt that I reviewed. I reviewed it for one of the members in the Wholesale Underground, and the brand was, let's say, Celtic salt. Well, it was almost like exactly the same as the real brand, but it was like Celtic salt plus. What you can do is when you see something like that, you're not sure, just click on this. It's going to open up an actual, like, not a storefront, but it's going to show you the brand. And when it pops that brand up, and let's say it's Ryobi, right? They're claiming they're a Ryobi brand. You click on this, it's going to show you all of the products that they sell. If you start seeing a bunch of private label products or a bunch of products that are not Ryobi, not in power tools, not in all of that stuff, that is a clear sign that this is a generic listing that was created by somebody else and you do not want to jump on it. Okay, all you have to do is click on this if you're unsure, and it will give you the information that you need. Now, the reason why Amazon has been cracking down on this so hard is because if you're saying this is a Ryobi brand and you're registering it under CDMGLC, Amazon's not going to catch this right away. But when they do catch this, they're going to say, I'm pretty sure this is a Ryobi brand and you're claiming it's this, So this Ryobi that is under this brand is a counterfeit, right? They're going to start thinking it's counterfeit because you're saying this is not Ryobi, this is CDMGLC. And they're like, no, this is Ryobi. And now you're like, well, you're counterfeiting the Ryobi brand, right? So then that's when they ask for a whole bunch of documentation. And sometimes Amazon is kind of lenient, and sometimes they crack down hard and you are guilty until proven innocent, and they will deactivate you right away. This is why you want to avoid this at all costs. Most of the Section 3s that have been going on for the last 6 to 8 months have all been because of generic products like this. If you have these generic products on your listings already, I mean, in your inventory right now, actively selling, what I would do is I would pull those units out and delete those listings as soon as you can, as soon as the return window is done. And if you have sold them in the past and you are no longer selling, I would go into my inventory, I would type in generic or see if you can do some research on which listings are generic, and I would remove them because you don't want to run into an issue where Amazon deactivates you. And even though you may provide everything right, one of the things that Amazon is so adamant about we do not tolerate is the possibility of selling counterfeit. You have to have everything in order. All your ducks in a row showing exactly where you got them from, exactly that they're legit, and exactly when you received them, the chain of custody, all of those things, and you still have to go and do a verification call to make sure everything's legit. It is a massive headache. But like I was saying, one thing that they do not tolerate is counterfeit, because in the start of Amazon FBA, when sellers could jump on the platform, there was so much counterfeit going on that's when Amazon started introducing so many rules and regulations about how they operate their business. And that is one thing that they do not tolerate whatsoever. So these things are very, very risky, regardless of how tempting they may be, regardless of how fast they may be selling, how little competition, how profitable they may be. Doesn't matter if you make $100 per unit. If you only get through 5 units and then Amazon cracks down on you and you can't make any more money, it's not worth it. All right, but now let me show you a couple of different products that are not generic listings. I think I've beaten a dead horse already with this topic, but other products that you also want to avoid. All right, so this is a scalp massager, and this is a clear example of a private label product. When you should kind of start paying attention to, is this a private label product or not, is when you start seeing everything done very professionally like this. This is standard practices of private label products, because everything with private label is all about optimizing for clicks and conversions, right? So a lot of other brands that don't do this, massive brands that don't do this, but private label always does. Another thing is the headline. If the brand is just like this, like the brand is Hida, right? Like that's not really like a brand name that's catchy that people are gonna be like Nike, right? Or Adidas or whatever, right? It's more of like, oh, this is a common name that's easy to learn, so everybody can recognize it in public, right? Private label sellers don't think like that. They're just like, oh, we're just selling it on Amazon. The brand doesn't really matter. So you'll get brand names like this. The next thing you want to look for is go down here to the sellers, and you want to expand this. And even if you see that there's more than one seller, if they're coming in and going out, that is a sign that this is a private label product. Somebody else came in, they got them kicked off, and it went right back down to the main seller. You can also see up here where it says Hida Direct. That is the main seller on the listing. Now, when it comes to 2 people on this listing, chances are for this particular product, it was just them twice. They either did an FBA twice, which you're not supposed to do, or they did a FBA and FBM, so they could be on the same listing twice. But this is a super clear sign that this is a private label product. There's only one seller for an extended period of time, and you do not want to jump on this listing. We want to look for multiple sellers, 3 or 4 different sellers, and we want that to be sustainable over time, and the brand is not on it. All right, next product is brand on the listing. So this is Swanson. This is a popular supplement brand, but if we go down here to the Keep Graph, we can see that Swanson Health Products is always on this listing. If we go back farther, we can see that they have always been on this listing, okay? Even if they haven't been on the listing for a while, maybe like 90 days, 6 months. For me, I'm like, I don't like when the brand is on the listing because, again, like I said earlier, all the headaches that you're going to run into. But if the brand is on the listing, this is what it's going to look like. It might not just say Swanson. It might say Swanson Health Products or like Hida Direct, right? But if it has the same name right there, you want to go and make sure that that's not the brand itself selling on the listing, because you're going to run into a bunch of headache. Next one is an active IP alert from IP Alert, the software right here, from Scan Unlimited if you have that IP alert from their software, or from SellerAmp. Now the SellerAmp, I'm going to go over it in the lesson where I talk to you about avoiding IP alerts or IP complaints. The only one that I pay attention to with SellerAmp is when it's red. If it's a yellow IP alert, I don't pay attention to those because that's just not correct. There's so many brands that I sell that have a yellow IP from SellerAmp. They're just not right. But the red ones, I do pay attention to. This is why I recommend this software, because you're going to get this flashing red light right here. And it's like, all right, don't jump onto this product, okay? Because they're going to file IP complaints. And this, in the video game category, Bethesda is somebody known for filing IP complaints or sending cease and desist letters. They don't have a lot showing on their actual listing, but they are known. I've sold a lot of video games. They are known to cause a lot of issues. So that is product with an IP alert. Now the last product is Clinique. This was a very popular product amongst arbitrage sellers, and they recently got restricted on the platform and nobody can sell it anymore. And this is a perfect example of what it looks like when you have a massive keep and drop. We have 41 sellers in one moment, and the next moment we have one. Okay, so if you see something like this, it may not be this drastic, but if you see something about like 10, 15 sellers plus, and it is a straight drop like this. It is not a gradual drop at all. It is literally a cliff from one moment to the other. This is a sign of an IP alert or an IP complaint or a restriction on an ASIN, or something happened on this listing and you do not want to be caught in the crosshairs, so avoid it completely. All right, guys, but that was products to stay away from. Watch this lesson again if you didn't fully understand everything that I said. This is a very, very important lesson to make sure that your account is protected and you avoid all of these issues that are getting people deactivated on the platform. Also, make sure to watch the avoiding IP complaints lesson, because that is another set of criteria that I use to know which products to stay away from.